I am here solely for the purpose of announcing for the public that the hearing scheduled for tonight on the Pudding Stone project is formally continued to July 27th, 2017, at which point hearings will recommence or there will be some other resolution. But that is the sole reason I am here. I thank you if you're here for that reason. We'll see you in July if you are. And otherwise, I will turn command over to Mr. Geller for the regular 40A sessions.
40B.
Oh, it's a 40B, I'm sorry. 40B session. Thank you.
48 is 8 minutes.
That's right, we don't have one. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Have a good night, Mark.
Afraid I didn't have to chair tonight.
Oh,
Wears me out.
I would have been thrilled. I can make cake chair these.
I chaired my first one
You did?
to continue a hearing. It was thrilling. It was thrilling. The power went straight to my head, as you can imagine. We went on for 3 hours, Lark and I.
Just for the continuance?
Yes. Wait, we don't have a court reporter.
No, we don't. We'll have to wait. And we have no duty tonight.
This is recorded anyway, isn't it?
It is, I believe it is, but since we're running transcripts.
I know.
What's that? Didn't she have somebody else here, though, the other night?
Yeah, she was training, but I'm not sure.
Hey, did Zurich swipe my pen?
There it is.
Well said. They're an untrustworthy breed.
Does anyone have contact information for her?
Allison? Our
Kristen. Our court reporter.
court reporter's missing? She's MIA. Well, my concern is I want the public to be able to, those who are here are going to hear it. But for others, I want them to be able to go online and get the information.
I'll take minutes between the two of us.
Is it recorded as well? I mean,
It's not televised.
It's televised. Can we generate a?
I'm gonna do it right now.
transcript is resulted.
Right. That's what I was thinking too. Of the recording.
Right.
And then there is a video that is uploaded to First Light Interactive TV. It's a video.
Right.
I'm not sure it's documentary. I'll have to think about that.
Meanwhile, we don't want to take any chances, so we do that.
I just think it'll appear to
official minutes, we'll take the minutes, but we'll do what we can for the posting.
Does anybody have her contact information?
Maria's coming.
Okay. Let's first see if maybe she's a little bit late.
She's always early for us.
And is the video itself accessible on the BATV site? If you want to see
You
it?
can do it.
But I assume it's not
Did you get
on
this?
a loop, you know, so.
Any constant temperature wise?
Yeah, it's good, thank you.
I don't know what I did.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. Seeing several of the
Anyone have an iPhone with record capability?
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Yes, I have patients who do that. They record sessions that way.
Question is whether they can then,
We're not equipped to transcribe.
No.
This is being televised live, and we'll also have video from tonight that will be uploaded, First Light Interactive TV.
Oh.
And that will be available for anyone to view at a later date. Okay, I'm just trying to contact the
that'd be great.
court reporter right now.
Okay.
So you guys, great, we all got this.
Yeah.
Three copies.
Yeah. It's consistent with, I think, something else we saw.
That's okay?
Just because it's video doesn't mean that people, I mean.
We'll do the best we can. I understand. We're gonna try and get a hold of her, but obviously if there's some problem and she can't get here, we've gotta do the hearing.
I understand that, but I don't, I mean, if it is video, there is a way, I mean, I know transcription is to taking video, so it is technically possible.
We'll take care of it, make sure the board gets it. Well, we typically do that.
email is just driving me nuts.
Yeah.
I have two other things that are involved in that require a lot of email activity.
Such is the nature of email.
I think it's an improvement to civilization, but sometimes I wonder. Emails.
I'm not so sure you're right about it. You know, I think it certainly makes communications more readily available in a quick turnaround. I don't know if that's an improvement. Sometimes there is benefit to having to compose,
Right.
to sort of consider and compose.
Exactly. So it used to be called writing letters.
Well, it also has the effect of forcing you to edit. You have to, by nature, be concise. You know, part of the reason I read leases now that are 100 pages long, and you read these leases, and
Can they get emailed as an attachment? Or?
of course it's easy.
Yeah, of
Of
course.
course. You know, because there's no necessity anymore to be concise. You could say, you can blather on with everything in the world, belts and suspenders. You can make the same statement 3 times in 3 different sections,
Yeah.
slightly different ways. No, I want to hear back from Maria first. Maybe she's been. Maybe there's a back room there with tape over their mouths. Oh, that? You trying to blame Mel?
Yeah.
All right, we'll give it another few minutes. I just want to see if she had a response.
Yeah, I can't
'Cause-
imagine when she was totally normal. Lost track of how many hearings we've had.
Yeah. Is she doing everyone?
She's done everyone with it,
Wow.
with 1 or 2 exceptions. Actually, maybe
That
1
is-
or 2 hearing exceptions.
That is hard work.
So I just want to confirm that we did confirm, and we received acknowledgement of the confirmation, and I also called the court stenographer's office, and they acknowledged that they did receive the confirmation, so they're looking into where our court reporter is. She's usually very reliable, so.
She is.
I'm not sure if you just want to wait for that call, and then you can decide if you want to start or wait. Or do you want to just begin?
I'm willing to wait for 5 minutes, but then in 5 minutes I'm going to start.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Marie.
In college, if your prof didn't show up in 15 minutes, you could leave the class. Oh, let's keep that going.
In law school, if you didn't show up, you lost 3 points off of the grade.
Professors are 20 minutes.
Oh, is that the rule? I remember that. I went to the finest law school in Austin, Brighton. BU. So we had one professor who was well known for his misanthropic tendencies. And he always wore black. And in BU, you know, there was a seating chart. You had to sit in the same seat every time. And he would only call on one student per class. And he peppered them. And he was merciless. He is directly responsible for at least 2 students in my section quitting law school. He made the first person they called on break down in tears in class. He was miserable. And if you were unprepared or not there, you lost 3 points. Now, he had a philosophy about law school, that he believed that you should not
Sorry, Chairman Geller. They don't understand what happened. They are trying to reach the court's reporter. In the meantime, they're trying to get someone here as quickly as possible as a replacement. I don't think that's going to be in 5 minutes, however.
Okay, that's fine. We'll get started, and we've got the public video available, and people, if they want to record, they can record, and we'll do the best we can. But I want to make sure that we get, as everybody knows, we're on a tight time frame, and I want to make sure we get what we need to achieve done this evening. We have only a few more hearing dates left to us, and we really need to get through all of the remaining topics within the time frame. So hopefully we will have somebody come in quickly and they can pick up wherever we are. So tonight's hearing, this is a continued hearing on 40 Center Street. For the record, again, my name is Jesse Geller. To my immediate left is Chris Hussey. To Mr. Hussey's left is Steve Chumenti, and to my right is Kate Paverman. As people will recall, at the last hearing, the board had a discussion on some things the board agreed, on other things the board did not agree, but the upshot of the discussion was that the board unanimously did not believe that there was a basis on which to deny the 40B application. The board also unanimously believed that this application was ripe for conditioning. And we had some discussion about height. We had some discussion about parking. There's disagreement, but there was a majority opinion, frankly, Mr. Hussey and myself, both about height and about parking. And I think the agreement, again, by two of the members, was that the height, that it's a large building, but that the height is permitted, or in particular that our finding was that under 40B, the height in and of itself is not, does not create any kind of a safety, health, or other concern that we're permitted to look at under 40B. We also had a discussion about parking, and Ms. Paverman, to her credit, stuck to her guns and believed that an appropriate ratio for parking was 1 space per unit, correct? Mr. Hussey and I did not agree with that, given the location of this project and what is available, and in reliance on peer review that we've obtained. So the hearing for tonight is going to start with a review of the applicant's request for waivers. The request for waivers is where the applicant looks at our local ordinances, including the zoning bylaw, and says, we don't want this to apply to the project that we have submitted. And in the board's reviewing those requests for waivers, we look for assistance. We look for assistance from the building commissioner, and I see Peter Ditto is also here, so Department of Engineering and Transportation, and they will assist us in reviewing these requests. I think it's mostly Mr. Bennett. I don't want to scare Mr. Ditto. He's here for alternative reasons. So people are aware, the next hearing is December 13th, 7 p.m. And assuming we get through the waivers, which we should this evening, we will then begin a discussion on conditions. Okay? The hearing, as people will remember, is subject to strict statutory time limits. And we have, barring a further extension, which the applicant is not compelled to give, as everybody will remember, and we haven't requested it, quite frankly. The hearing will close based on the time frame December 21st. Okay?
Next meeting is December 13th, you said?
Correct. December 13th. We did get an updated report from Cliff Bomer. As people will remember, Cliff Bomer was the ZBA's peer reviewer over design. And Mr. Bomer, I don't know whether this has been posted yet. It came in late today. We can have, it certainly will be posted for everyone to see. But the summary of it is that he reviewed the front facade where the developer, the initial request was that there be a even depth on that 5th and 6th floors, and the developer in the alternative proposed pushing one side of it, I believe it was back 7 feet, and the other side was 4 feet. And Mr. Bomer's response was, my opinion is that the modified proposal is an enhancement to the floor plans and also improves the massing of the structure as seen from street level. So he does not take issue with what the developer has proposed, which is not a consistent setback in the front, 2 different depths. Mr. Bomer also responded to the question concerning the handicapped access from the garage to the vestibule. If people remember, within the garage there is handicap parking, and then there is, I don't know whether they're going to create some kind of a design painted element showing a path or how they will indicate it, but it rolls within the parking lot, I don't know how many feet, but over to the vestibule entryway in the garage. And Mr. Bomer's, there was some question about safety, and Mr. Bomer's comment on that is that my opinion is that the path that is indicated in the parking structure is a suitable accessible route that connects compliant accessible parking to the entry vestibule. And he also cites Massachusetts Architectural Board rules and regulations and ADA requirements in support of what he is saying. He does suggest that the striped area between the spaces in the vestibule be expanded, that is a painted area, to at least 3 feet. He, in particular, notes that beyond strict code compliance, I do not consider this particular situation to be particularly hazardous to people with mobility issues. And that's essentially the content of his updated information.
Jim, could I just ask, I understand the developer isn't here tonight, but it's possible that that report prepared by Mr. Bomer exceeded the amount of money we had available. Could the board request the developer's representative to convey a request that
Yes.
he pay for?
Developer's representative, we are asking you to convey a request that your client, the applicant, pay the additional fee to the design peer reviewer. And I don't know what, if any, I don't know what it is. Thank you. Okay. One outstanding issue is we are anticipating comments from the police department. As people will recall, we did have comments from the fire department essentially telling us that there is no safety issue, and they believe that their trucks and their emergency vehicles have full access to all sides of the building, which is most critical. And Maria, do we have any sense of when we might have?
We will have that this week, and definitely before the next hearing.
Perfect, thank you. Okay. Mr. Angler, you're here to speak on behalf of the developer, because I don't see anybody else here. Left alone. You got a bullseye. Okay, if you would review the waivers request for the board, and then we can consider them.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, members of the public. Bob Angler, representative of the developer. Talk about the waivers. I would like to make a couple of preliminary comments. The waivers, and I go through this all the time. In fact, I had a waiver discussion at 8 a.m. this morning for 2 hours, so here I am, 8 p.m. doing the same thing. The waivers tie into the plans. It's very hard to, either they tie into the plans in terms of physical attributes to the plans, or they're procedural issues about what 40B is supposed to convey versus special permits or variances or other things. So they're one or the other, and basically, unless you find otherwise, the waivers are supposed to be very consistent with our plans. In other words, we need the waivers to build the plans. So to say you approve our plans, but you don't approve the waivers, would be rather inconsistent unless there's something missing here that we don't really need, and you can tell me. I think there's a couple of questions that will come up tonight, and Peter mentioned some of them, and we'll talk about that, and there's another one we'll talk about, but let me just start by going through what we think we need to build the project or to have it approved by you under the rules and regulations and guidelines of Chapter 40B. The first one is the table of use regulations. It's kind of fundamental that we're not allowed to build this building that we've proposed in this zone except under Chapter 40B. It doesn't comply with this underlying zoning or any special permit. So we need a waiver to allow ourselves to build this building. Under Section 4.08, we're asking for a waiver to allow the affordable housing requirements that govern and work with 40B. In other words, 40B is their own affordability requirements, separate from the town's requirements. They have a local bylaw on affordability if you're coming in for a special permit or maybe inclusionary bylaw, whatever the town has. We're saying we need to follow what 40B asks for, and I don't know if they're really that different, but basically we're trying to tie it to 40B. The third waiver is 5.09, the design review. The design review requirements come in when you're doing a special permit, and the town obviously has a procedure for that. The comprehensive permit, as everybody knows, or should, we've said it enough times, it's one-stop shopping from the zoning board representing all local boards in terms of permit granting authority. So purpose of 40B is to streamline all the permits from different local entities, make sure the zoning board handles all that, and that would include design review of the planning board, which isn't required. Now, the planning board can weigh in as they have written letters, but the decision-making authority rests here, and that's why we're seeking a procedural waiver under 5.09. Then we get to the actual physical or dimensional waivers from table 5.01, 5.20, 5.22. The minimum floor area is a waiver of 1.10 in the M district. That is, the floor area has to equal the same size as the lot size, the total floor area, and we obviously with our 40-unit plan can't live with that, and so we're seeking a waiver of the FAR because our FAR is 3.62 based on the formula of the square footage in the building. And there are exceptions to the maximum floor area ratio and regulations for residential units, which are also all part of 5.2 and 5.22, all tying into the FAR, which, no surprise, we need it for the building that you see in the plans. Going to the next waiver, how do I do this? Just go up? Go down on the arrow feature? Okay, all right, thank you. The maximum height of the buildings is 40 feet in this district, and we all know that 6 stories is not 40 feet. Bob Roth did a different calculation and found that the building is actually a foot above the street level, so we are actually taking off the height of the building measured at the midpoint of the street frontage. It's not measuring, as we had said, 67.52, but 68.52, because we already are a foot higher than the street. So the actual building height of the building will be 67.4, but not measured, what's he saying here? It's either 67 or 68.52, and that's higher than the 40-foot limitation in the district, so we're asking for a waiver to get our building built. Section 5.43 says the special permit of variances to allow yard and setback dimensions as shown on the plan, and to do that under the local bylaw would be 15 feet, would be the maximum to allow yard and setback dimensions, and we're having only 5 feet for the yard and setback dimensions, as you've seen on the plan. I don't know why that's different from the minimum side yard, which is a waiver from 10 feet plus the length of the building divided by 10 feet, which would be 24 feet, and we're proposing 5.1 inch on the east side and 6 feet 1 inch on the west side, again, consistent with the plans that you have. Same thing with the front yard, which is 15 feet in this zone, and 5 feet is our proposal for the plans in section 5.50, 5.51. The minimum rear yard is the next one, which is a waiver from the 30-foot requirement to 5.2, 5 feet 2 inches for the rear yard based on our plans. Table 5.01 has the maximum building stories, which are 4 stories, and we have 6 stories, so we're asking for a waiver from that. And then there's an exceptions for alignment of 20 feet, and we have a 5-foot front setback, so I'm not quite clear how the alignment 20-foot works, but it doesn't work in our case, so we're asking for a waiver. Table 5.01 and sections 5.90 asks for a minimum open space, a landscaped open space of 10%. Our landscaped open space is calculated on the plans as 5.5%, so we need a waiver of the landscaped open space. The next section is the minimum open space, which is usable, meaning it's not the landscaped area and it's not hardscape, it's usable open space. There's a 20% requirement in this zone, and we don't have any minimal open space, so we have to ask for a waiver for that. Table 6.02 is the parking spaces. The waiver is for 2 spaces per unit, which would be 82 spaces, or 80 spaces plus 2 others, I guess. And we have 25 spaces, as we discussed a week ago, includes the stackable units. So we can't make the 2 units requirement. We had a long discussion about that and what was the demand study and what your consultants talked about, and came up with 25 spaces. Also a waiver in the similar vein from the parking ratio. Instead of having 0.825, we need a ratio of 0.625 to get those 25 spaces with the 8 stackers into that situation. Section 6.02 says you have to have parking designated and marked for use by visitors and tradespeople, and that's a 10% requirement. We don't have anything designated for tradespeople and visitors. We feel they can park in the neighborhood when they visit, and so we're asking for a waiver from that because all our parking spaces will be for the residents. Section 6.04 asks for a maximum driveway curb cut of 20 feet, and we have 21 feet, so we have 1 foot over that for the maximum curb cut, which I think has been discussed and accepted, but we need a waiver for that. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, we're up there. The next one is difficult. It's the compact cars, which you allow 25%. Now, let me explain why Bob is asking for such a huge waiver. He went over it with me today. He visited East Boston, as he mentioned to you last week, and found a semi-automatic stacking system that he liked. He's been in contact with the providers of those stackers and the specs that go with them, and it isn't at all clear that the height of our garage by an inch or two may not allow full-size cars to be stacked. They would allow compact cars to be stacked because they're actually shorter. But we're not clear about that until we do the final working drawings when all those dimensions are known. So he is asking for a waiver on the eventuality that we need compact cars in those stackers. Now, if you ask me, quite honestly, why ask for 72%, I don't know, because we do have a plan that shows compact cars on the ground, and if you take that plan and add 16 stacker spaces to it, I don't think you come up with 72% of all the spaces. But we didn't have a chance to really go into that, so I'm just going to put that out there and say, let's see what we come up with more specifically the next time and give you a more detailed explanation of how many stackers we might need. We certainly will not have an answer as to the detailed engineering of the stackers in the garage until we get down to working drawings. And you might suggest something conditioned on the building permit that has those drawings that provides the need for the waiver, and I'm okay with that if there's some appropriate language that deals with that, because I don't know what we're going to need. The next series of waivers, I think there's been some maybe my misunderstanding with Peter Ditto, because I read his memo that came in late today. And what we're trying to look for is waiving administrative requirements that belong to the zoning board, not to other permit granting boards in town. Peter was suggesting, and he can speak for himself, but he was suggesting in his memo not to waive that because there's monitoring and enforcement provisions that tie to state law that we shouldn't waive. We are not trying to waive monitoring and enforcement provisions. We are trying to waive permit provisions that rest with you, not with other boards. And to the degree that those other boards, whether it's the Public Works or Transportation, has to monitor the activities or the noise. I met with the building department today about the noise factor. When they get detailed working drawings and specifications, they will indicate whether they need something on the roof to attenuate the noise. That's all fine with us. We're not seeking any waivers from any of that. So what we're asking for waivers for is, to the extent the administrative process is inconsistent or imposes restrictions that are not part of the relief granted by you, by the zoning board. And that's really all. Now, maybe we didn't say it right, and maybe those sections need to be clarified, and I'm all open to a further discussion about those if we're wrong, and Peter can explain them if we are. But those are the kinds of waivers of procedures we're looking for in those sections. In terms of the demolition of a building or the street construction and installation utilities, we don't want to waive the actual monitoring and review of the construction. We're just saying that the plans should be the permit set to build the streets, but the monitoring and the review by the town should still go on as they would anyway. So I don't think we're inconsistent, or I don't think we have a different point of view, but he's saying don't waive them, and we're saying, well, part of it may be waived. We can talk more about that, but those are the kinds of things that we were looking at. Same thing with stormwater management. We're not trying to waive state review or review of a state requirement as to how they function and how they're monitored, just how the design works, which he's already said. So far, so good. He needs to see final design, but he certainly will review that, and we're all okay with that. So maybe there needs to be some language clarification on some of these to get that done. That's the way I would look at it, and I'm happy to answer any questions
Okay.
about it.
Anybody have questions at this point?
No, not at this point.
Sorry.
It's the very language I told them not to do.
Well, I did them as a lump. I can go through each one of them. Okay. You want me to go through the last page?
So that is a catch-all, and that is
Starting with which? The Department of Public Works?
the last page of the one we're paying.
I have one more. This is my last page. Oh, we crossed that out.
If you didn't correct it out,
Will you cross it out? We understand that's not a type of blanket waiver. We're not looking for blanket waivers. We're not looking for some hypothetical thing, so I thought you meant the page that was before that, but no, we don't want that last sentence in there.
Okay. Anything? No?
No.
Okay. Building Commissioner Bennett, I'm sure will address some of these, but I would note that some of the sections that you're referring to, it seems to me, are inapplicable in this instance. And I'm sure Mr. Bennett will explain why. I, in particular, would note Section 5.43 really is not applicable here.
5.43?
5.43.
Okay.
I want to call on Building Commissioner Bennett to come forward and give us his review of the request.
Good evening, Dan Bennett, Building Commissioner. I did have a chance to review the requested waivers. I do have some comments. I did prepare them in a memo to the board, and some of the requests in their initial, or in their proposed waiver list were not specific enough, so I can either address it in a further memo or identify them tonight, whatever you think would work best. But in looking at the list, and I did review this for consistency in the bylaw and whether the interpretations were the same as how we, typically interpret it on a day-to-day basis. For the most part, they were all in line. 543, which you just mentioned, I think I had noted that as required to build. It's something that I did think about. That has to do with special permits and variances, which we're not really granting here.
Right, it's 40A
Exactly.
special permits from side yard or dimensional.
Right. So some of the, going through the specific list, I did identify a few areas that I don't think waivers are requested, specifically 5.09, and I identified them as not being requested or not, for the board not to review them, because a couple of them they've already submitted. So they've got an existing conditions plan, so there's no reason to waive, I don't believe, that section of 5.093C2. You must submit an existing conditions plan, which they have.
So are you saying that there are specific sections of 5.09 that they should have to comply with, and otherwise 5.09 should be waived, or are you saying 5.09 should not be waived at all?
I'm saying that there are 7 provisions of 509 that I believe should not be waived.
Should not be waived, but otherwise it should not apply.
Correct.
And let me anticipate what their question is going to be. Because the way 5.09 is drafted, there's a recommending body, right? The planning board makes recommendations on those characteristics that the ZBA then looks at, and they can either say, yes, we agree, or no, we don't agree. And just to cut to the chase with Mr. Engler's comment, he doesn't want another body, okay? He doesn't want the planning board to have a say here, because that's inconsistent with 40B. So you're not suggesting that, I assume?
Nope. So 509 is a recommendation process. The planning board meets, they develop a recommendation, they give it to the board then goes forward in your normal 40A process.
Right.
In this instance, a majority of 509 would be waived with the exception of these 7 items. And a few of them, the reason I'm requesting them not be waived is because they are complying with it currently. They will be providing a landscape plan. Stormwater drainage is something that's, that Peter and I think the applicant have discussed about not waiving. There's a safety and security provision. I don't think this board wants to waive any type of criteria that would enhance or at least provide safety and security for the project. There's energy efficiencies. That goes with the design, and the town of Brookline is a stretch code community, so that would go above and beyond. The utility service, you're required to do all new developments underground, so I don't think the board wants to waive that type of thing. So those are the little details, but it's things that they've already indicated on their plans that they'd comply with, and I would recommend not granting a waiver.
Thank you.
You asked for
Yes, we're global.
you asked to waive the entire section of 5.09, so I've identified those 7 details there.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
in your memo, do you elaborate on which particular 7 provisions
Yeah, please, Chris.
is there? Okay,
These are
Yeah,
the
it's on the top of
Thanks.
page 2.
gotcha.
And I actually looked at that. I agree, I would agree with them.
With respect to the compact spaces, I put not applicable because the document that I was looking at, they showed 4 compact, they showed, 25 spaces. 20 of them are the racking system. 4 of them are compact and 1 is handicapped. So they're below the 25% on the plans that I reviewed. However, this board wants to proceed and to try to review what the specifications of those stacker systems are and how that would play into the parking requirements is something that could either be handled in a condition or something that we could do a plan review, but it is something that this board would have to, consider if they want to go above that 25% number. I did, I don't know if I noted it in my memo, but they didn't cite the specific section for that, and I will get another memo to you specifically. So they kind of cited just the heading, and I would go down further into the subsections and cite those as well.
It is cited in their memo, the compact spaces. That's here. That's
6.032.
It's in your memo, third line up.
Right, so compact cars, they got a 6032E when it's actually 6.04.2E. So those are the types of things that
Dan,
I'll
are you taking
correct.
these chronologically in the order in which the requests alphabetically?
Yes, I
Or
did.
you-
I
So
went-
you don't have, I just want to make sure the things that you're not mentioning, are you saying you're fine with those? Because
Yeah, anything that I wrote required to build is similar to how the applicant stated at the beginning. It's, these waivers are required to construct the project as they have proposed. So I'm not getting into detail on the front yard waivers, on the side, or the height. That's part of the whole package.
in terms of their methodology of measurement of height,
I did speak with Mr.
Yep.
Roth with regard to that, and he's using A, which essentially says that you go from the street lot line.
right?
And if you use that, he's essentially he's adding a foot to the height of the building. If he was to use B, then you would be using the height around the building. So he's actually adding a height, so it's a more conservative waiver approach than if you were to,
And
go
you
with
agree
B.
with that methodology?
Yes,
He's
yep.
done his math correctly?
yes.
Okay.
The big area that I have a concern on is is R and S. That's the enforcement arm of the building department with respect to zoning. And I know there are some sentences and some references there that might, it's 40A strong because it specifically talks about our bylaw. And at the same time, we have a 40B application here, but I would be against striking those enforcement provisions because that's how, there are provisions of this bylaw that are going to apply here that we would want to be able to still enforce, moving forward. And a blanket waiver of 900, 1, 2, and 3, and then I think there was one other I would not be in favor of. The 905 section, that's fine. That is the criteria that the board uses to determine if they're going to grant a special permit or
Isn't it
variance.
irrelevant, though?
Yeah, and that, you could
It's
either
like
say
It's
not
like section
applicable.
543.
Any special permit or variance provisions in here would not be applicable because it's a 40B
Right.
application. was it in a nutshell. If there's any other questions I could answer. They did do both parking counts. We have two parking bylaws that essentially we're enforcing right now with the town meeting. They adopted Article 19. So we have the current parking, and we have a proposed one, or they're actually working in sync. If the board was going to waive it, I would suggest they waive from both. And the
Dan,
applicant has provided that information.
VW and X, are those outside your scope or within your scope?
Yeah,
That's
those,
what I thought.
yep.
Okay,
those are
and
not
you don't
in
have a
there.
comment about them one way or another?
A demolition, that's typically the bylaw. We send that over to preservation. That's the demolition delay.
Right.
I think we're past, I'm not sure if we're past the year from when they initially filed that or not. Street construction and stormwater are both DPW.
Okay.
And you would be DPW as well.
And anybody else have questions?
I know we'd requested a while ago that the applicant demonstrate that the building comply with all the plan's relevant building codes, something along those lines. Has that been produced ever, and is that relevant at this point?
That's a working drawing condition which we have to live with. At the end of all our working drawings, your building inspector says we meet all codes. That's a requirement, so not at the conceptual level, on a preliminary level.
I did put a memo to the board earlier. I put it to the board for all the comprehensive permits that are in front of them, because there are a number of buildings that are in close proximity to the property lines. It's not the typical
Right.
type of construction that we get here. So I did ask if the board could request some sort of a preliminary code analysis, and most of that is just for the exterior of the building. So your window openings, your window materials, or your building materials, you want to make sure that if you're within 3 feet of the lot line, that you comply with the ratings and the opening requirements, or 5 feet, the same type of thing. So the closer you are to the property line, the less, or the more fire-resistant materials you have to use, and the less percentage of openings you can have per floor. So one of the requests that I did do in a memo probably 2 or 3 months ago was, so that we don't get too far along, or the board approve a design or some sort of materials or openings, what I wouldn't want to happen is that they go through this entire process, come to our office, and then we say, you can't do these openings, you can't do this material, and then have anyone have to come back to the board for a minor modification or possibly a major modification.
So have you gotten that analysis?
No.
Has that been presented to
I
you?
haven't, no.
Then why don't we get that done so that we don't arrive at precisely that situation? Because we're kind of nearing the end of the line.
So that's our risk.
It's our time as well. We don't want our time wasted, so it's not just your risk.
Not your risk, not your risk at all.
Yes, it is our risk, because we would have to come back and be faced with the time of going through the modification again, so it's not just your time.
An hour of your time, a year from now, I don't think so.
I
I hear exactly what Dan's saying. I think we even asked Peter Bartesh to do that and look at it, but that's a code issue that you're saying we have to live with, and I appreciate what you're saying, which is, don't come and show me something that doesn't work, and I'm gonna tell you it doesn't comply, and you have to go back, and that's our risk, that if we screw up, we have to come back here. I don't think we will. I think we understand Chief Cruz is very excellent at these kind of things, and I think we're building according to what you need us to build it to. So providing a code analysis at this stage of the game doesn't seem, yes, it'd be nice, but it's our risk.
Dan, what have we done in the past with other projects?
I haven't, this is the first time it's come up with the number of 40Bs that are in front of us right now. I had the concern that, these designs were kind of going forward through the zoning board process, and not that any of the applicants weren't looking at the code issues, they are. I just wanted something kind of to give me a level of comfort that if they were to proceed, that we would be okay. And it wouldn't be an entire code analysis, so I'm not looking at egress and occupants. It's just pretty much the exterior envelope of the building and the openings, that the proximity to the property lines, that they are compliant, or at least, from everything they've done so far, they don't have to do full-blown construction drawings. But there is, I think there's probably enough information that any architect or designer would be able to provide something simple that we could rely on.
Thank you. Thank you. Maria, will you make a note of that? Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
You also raise section, there is raised as one of the waivers, section 5.542, which is exception for alignment.
Yes, that's just front yard setback. So the bylaw says that if you have two buildings within 150 feet on each side, and they're further from the lot line than the required setback, they have to do an average alignment. So that is something that they should get a waiver from.
Okay.
We've got a couple of questions, Mr. Benson. Incidental, the first one, A, it asks for an allowance to allow the property to be used as multifamily. It's an M zone, isn't it? So that is automatically multifamily can be allowed in here, right?
By special permit, so not as of right.
I see, okay, gotcha.
There is one other thing. If you go on table 501, they didn't cite it, but I can address it. There's a provision under M, in the M1, you have, this would be any other dwelling structure. The first dwelling unit, you need 3,000 square feet. For each additional dwelling unit, you need 1,000 square feet. So the as-of-right provision of that would mathematically would work out to 8 units. So they would need a waiver from 501, table 501 for that lot area, minimum lot size provisions as well. And that's something I will address further if the board would
Please.
like.
Okay, any other questions? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dick, if you like.
I understand the parking space waiver requirement, but as you know, or I think I'm right, that we have no requirement to meet what was passed by town meeting on the lower parking ratio. Anything that was passed, any regulation that comes subsequent to our application filing, we are not required to meet. So while it might be useful information, I don't see why you'd put it in there and say it's a waiver from a regulation that came after we filed for our comp permit. So I just want to make that point. Not a big deal, it doesn't affect anything, but I think that's correct.
Okay. Mr. Ditto?
Good evening. My name is Peter Ditto, Director of Engineering and Transportation. And I denied 3 waiver requests, and the first one was a waiver from the Department of Public Works site plan approval process. Now, to me, that's cut and dry. That's something that we,
This is waiver U for those who,
Oh,
I don't know if we can put this up so people can see it. Be a lot easier for them.
so I guess I'm not really sure where the applicant's coming from. I wouldn't hesitate to sit down with him and find out what his concerns are and what my concerns are, because I really don't see how I can waive the plan approval process. If there's something within that plan approval process that, you know, is troublesome, I'd certainly happy to listen to it. The tree removal is, I believe, there's state statute on how you remove a state tree, and Mr. Brady can certainly chime in on that. And for the construction and maintenance-related parking permits, we have a parking permit program in town specifically for construction projects. And it works quite well. We asked the contractor developer to give us a schedule and what his needs are on a monthly basis, and we find a space for him to park. And they're renewed every month. So, and that works quite well, both for the neighborhood and for the contractor working in that neighborhood. Town bylaw section 7.3.2 is developers requesting a waiver of the street construction permit bylaw. When we issue a street construction permit, we issue it to a licensed contractor who's insured and bonded. This process assures that we're getting quality work, as well as notification that inspections have to take place at a certain point in time, as well as the requirement for the police department if there are any details required. Last but not least is a waiver of the procedures under the town bylaw section 8.26, I believe it is, stormwater management. We were issued what's called a NIPD's permit. I think the first one was issued 8 years ago, and now the second rendition was released, I want to say, a month or two ago. But a NIPD's permit is a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, and it's a federal permit that is issued to the town, and it ranges from a whole host of things. But the one things that we're looking closely at is the quality of stormwater runoff, quality and quantity. So this, by federal statute, can't be waived as far as I'm concerned. Could be wrong. But we've never not done any project without going by the book with our stormwater management policy.
Okay. Questions?
Actually, one question I had related to the stormwater management calculations that you have been expecting, that you referred to in your memo. You said that the calculations that you are supposed to get have to be modified to reflect the location of the infiltration system, which was changed to be put in the driveway in front of the building and the sidewalk, which is a change that was made many, many months ago. And I'm just curious, and Mr. Mangler, perhaps you can answer as to why that hasn't been provided yet, since we now were 2 weeks away from the end of the hearing, and this is a critically important safety issue.
There was calculations provided, at least the ones given to me on the original site, which is fine. There was nothing wrong with those. However, with this new system going, the number of infiltration units is going to vary. So we need to know exactly what's the capacity of those units, and at what point in time will they overflow into the town's drainage system. It's not it's cookie cutter type of calculation. It's not very difficult.
And when will you do it? When will you do it? Okay, if the chairman's satisfied with that, I'm satisfied with that.
Obviously, given the number of hearings we have left, we would need it for the 13th.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Anything else?
No.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So, let's take these in the order of appearance and walk through them. Some of them we can dispense with. quicker than others. Um, So, A, what I will do is I'll read off the waiver letter. Yeah, sorry about that. I'll read off the waiver letter, and if people would jump in, or if they want to simply say, fine, we'll then move on down the list. So A, which is a waiver under section 407, multifamily uses. I think there's logic to it. That seems to be what's going on here.
I agree.
Agree.
Okay. B, affordable housing requirements. I think that's the nature of what is going on. This is you're providing affordable housing under 40B rather than the requirements of 40A.
I agree.
Agree.
We've never agreed so much.
Agree.
Section 5.09, I understand Mr. Engler's comment. I believe the focus of his comment is really about the fact that the purpose of 40B, not the purpose of 40B, but the function of 40B is to give to a single body, the ZBA, decision-making authority. His objection, I believe, and Mr. Engler, you can jump in if you disagree, but his objection under section 5.09 is to the extent that it grants to any third-party body the decision-making authority that's granted to the ZBA under 40B. I don't take issue with that component. However, and I think he's agreed with that when Mr. Bennett was speaking about it. Mr. Bennett has raised 7 exceptions that should not be waived. They are section 5.09.3C2, which is an existing conditions plan, 5.09.3C3, which is a drawing of the proposal, 5.09.4F, which is stormwater drainage, 5.09.4G, which is utility service, 5.09.4H, advertising features, 5.09.4J, safety and security, and 5.09.4.N, M is in Mary, which is energy efficiency. My feeling is that I'm all right with the waiver in the context of the ask, with the exception of the 7 items that Mr. Bennett has raised.
Here's the concern I have, and
Yep.
I haven't gone through 509 sufficiently to,
Then go through it. We won't vote on it then.
okay,
I want you
let
to
me,
go through
let me just say what my concern is. Under the design review guidelines of 40B, we do have the power to comment on materials used, the ZBA does, materials used, and the aesthetics of buildings. So I don't want, for example, there to be changes made in the future that are made without our knowing or whatever, and for it to be said that we did not have the power or ability to have viewed that.
In-house,
In-house.
ZBA.
Right, ZBA. So I don't want to waive that.
Okay, tell them.
So, this was very clear in the 21 Crown and Shield case, where very tight control was, and coordination was maintained with the community, but it was nothing that was not spelled out by the statute and the ability. But it was very clear there that, as to the steps that had to be taken. But for that reason, I don't want to waive 509.
I think there's some confusion. I don't have any problem with the planning board and other boards providing design review and information to you, as they already have, as long as we're not going to them, as used to be the case, where they had separate review power. So the degree that they input to you, and the degree that you put into your permit design issues, or outline spec and plan, so that any changes have to come back to you that don't meet those specs that we give you,
Let me suggest that on the section 5.09 requested waiver, that you take a look at section 5.09 and that there's some wordsmithing that needs to take place with
Yeah,
that.
I just can't agree to the
Okay.
waiver right now. I can look at it.
Okay, anybody else have anything on that?
No, I think that makes sense.
Sure, Steve? Okay. Next one, D, maximum floor area, exceptions to maximum floor area ratio, regulations for residential units. I think we've talked about that, and that is what is going on.
Unfortunately, yep.
E, which is maximum height of buildings. Again, same comment. I was specific with Building Commissioner Bennett, asking him whether the methodology is correct. He has confirmed that it is, and that in fact it was conservatively measured. So I think your comment stands.
Which one?
Unfortunately, it is.
Yes, yes, okay.
Anybody else?
No.
No? Okay. 543, as mentioned before, I think it simply does not apply in this instance.
I agree.
G, H, and I are similar requests. They're dimensional requests. And that is consistent with their proposal.
Yep.
Okay. Maximum building stories, again, is consistent with their proposal and consistent with E. Jump in if you want to. No? 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 Okay. K,
Okay.
K, building exceptions for alignment, as Mr. Bennett explained, there is provision in our bylaw about abutting buildings, neighboring structures, and alignment to the street if they're at various depths.
I didn't fully understand that, but I think it's technicality that is not really,
Could I just point out, if you want, the modal pattern on that street is between 22 and 27
Right.
feet for the front yard setback on both sides of
So
the street.
this goes to, I think,
oh, I
the
see.
first or second hearing where we were talking about the consistent front yard setback.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
Minimum open space, again, same comment as above. Minimum open space,
Now, this is something I actually regret. Not that we can do much now, that I don't think we ever really discussed at all adequately. The lack of usable open space in this project.
That's true. I was wondering about roof deck. Is that allowed?
Well, I know they put in the,
well, you know, as much as you like, remember, usable open space has a definition. And as much as you like to say that they should have usable open space and you're willing to grant them a building of this size, and therefore you're left with only usable space on the roof, my concern is that you are, in that fashion, extending the height of the
I was
use.
going to say.
And frankly, I'm not sure the neighbors will want to have people on the roof of this building looking down on them.
I agree.
well, I
So
think, but I think one of the questions that you have to look at under 40B and looking at the case law, again, is what the amenities are offered to the people in the building. And there is very little in terms of amenity that is offered to people in the building. And in terms of usable open space, you know, one of the things, the problems we've all had with this project is that, as Mr. Chimenti has always said, it is just too intense a use of the space, of the piece of land. It is using up every single inch of land, and that's something which has always been so offensive about this project. Putting a building within 5 feet of the setbacks is, in a non-infill situation, is unconscionable. And if it weren't for 40B, we would never allow it. And it is something which is
Right,
sticks
fact,
in the
would be here
craw.
under section 5.43,
That's right.
and it is unlikely we would grant that relief.
That's right, and it is, as a neighbor in the neighborhood, it is something which I find appalling to be finding myself having to approve under the law. If I found a legal way to be able to say it was not approvable, I would. But unless my people agree with me that as something that is just too intense a use to be, then I think that, I think it is too intense a use. I think there's case law under Hastings Village versus Wellesley, which could give us some support, but I think it's a very tough row. I think that for the only thing which would make it better is making it, and I think, again, we're going to have to deal with the parking issue now that we have 72% compact cars, and we'll get to that in a little bit, which makes parking even worse again.
Right.
It's not an ideal building, to say the least. It's
I wouldn't even characterize
horrific.
it that way.
It's
You know,
horrific.
I said it at the last hearing. I don't think it's a nice building. I think it's overly intensive for the site. But the operative question is, under 40B, what can we do and what are we allowed to do? And frankly, how has it been interpreted under case law by those who review decisions? And I think you've answered that question. I mean, you know the answer to the question. That's the problem. That's why it's not easy. It's not easy. Because, so, I think everything you've said is spot on. And that's what we struggle with. And that's why these hearings run on long.
I'd like to hear what Steve, I agree, I'd like to hear what Steve has to say too, because he's pulling his
We basically
Microphone
disagree
close.
on what it is we're doing, and I'm reluctant to get started since I'm not voting on this project, but, and you clearly have 2 votes to proceed, but, it isn't enough to say that these zoning rules don't apply. They don't apply literally, but when you read the 40B regs, what they really do, if you read all of it, not just the safety part, but you read the site design and the height and the bulk and the parking and the open space, they really describe conceptually what it is that the town has attempted to achieve in its zoning rules. And what the 40B regs are saying is, you shouldn't be constrained by this 5-foot setback or the specific setback. But in discussing open space and all of the other stuff, what they're saying is, that's the sort of thing you should take into consideration without being constrained by the specific limitation. And what we're supposed to do, really, is balance that. Balance these are local concerns, the fact that this thing is so big, so grossly oversized, no parking, and so on, and the burden it is to that neighborhood. And balance, basically, to reduce the size, to adjust the design, so that it doesn't commit such an outrage, basically, to the community and the neighborhood. That's the authority we have. The mere fact that we don't have the authority to apply a specific limitation in that statute doesn't mean it doesn't apply. What it means is it's the conceptual objective that's in the regulation that does apply, and they're expecting us to make a judgment. So, I think to say that, well, we can't apply this zoning rule, really, basically, that's just the beginning of it. What we're supposed to do is apply the values and the characteristics that are articulated in the regs. And they don't just say safety, they go on for 2 pages. And these boards that I've sat on and listened to don't do that. I think this was more than adequate justification to reduce the size of this project.
Steve,
based on their rules. That's what I would say.
I've got to tell you, Steve, I disagree with you both in terms of your interpretation of the regulations, and apparently our 40B consultant does as well. And I would also say that I disagree with you because 40B has existed, and I regret having to say this, but 40B has existed for 47 years. And, you know, our decision-making, like any decision-making, is constrained both by what's in the regulatory scheme as well as how it's interpreted. And I haven't done a full audit of appeal decisions, but I am unaware of any decisions, in 47 years, that would go as far as you're proposing.
I'm proposing to take a floor off this building.
I don't know that that helps you, either way.
I know, well, it's a terrible situation. I know, I mean, I can go back and forth, and I know what the courts have done. I know I would like to take a floor off. I don't think we have the votes for it. I don't think it will affect open space.
No, which was the way you started.
Yes, it would reduce the intensity of the use of the building, but anyway, it is a very difficult law, and I brought up the point about open space, and yeah, I guess I have to grant that waiver.
Okay. Parking spaces, which is N, so there's a reduction, and you can recuse yourself on that because,
Yeah.
you know, we've heard you. Chris and I believe that the spaces which include stackable units, and we'll get into a further discussion on your topic
Right.
In a minute, but that 25 spaces at this location,
Right.
given proximity, works. I don't want to take your thunder.
No, that's all right.
Okay. Section 6.02, that is what's happening. So that would be true in any scenario, even if they were providing 1.0.
Yep.
And I would say that that's consistent with, I'm trying to think of structures that are new structures where they've set aside a significant number of spaces for tradespersons and guests. My building doesn't have any. So, maximum curb cut, I think that the genesis of this was to make the drive safer so that vehicles entering and exiting, there would not be a risk of conflict. I think this is the function of that.
Yep.
Okay. Next, our favorite, everyone's favorite. So section 6.032E, and this is their additional request that the parking be largely for compact cars. Let me tell you that I am absolutely not in favor.
Thank you.
Not
In favor.
in favor of this. Not, N-O-T.
Yeah, I don't see, I mean, as we all know, I think the parking's bad enough, but to have it be 75% limited to compact cars just makes it unusable for many families.
But isn't he telling you that the devices they're relying on will not accommodate?
He's
full-size
telling you
cars?
that he looked at a specific product.
And the
He's
one
going to have to get a different product.
Right.
And
Or structure the building so that it can hold this product if he wants that product enough.
or do what? I didn't even hear you.
If he wants that product enough. Well, it wouldn't make any sense anyway. Doesn't matter. So I am not in favor of granting the request for Q.
Okay.
Let me say that.
Chris, what's
Chris?
your?
Well, I agree that having so many compact spaces is going to limit the cars, some of the cars. These things tend to go in cycles right now because the gas is going down, the SUVs and the larger cars are going back and being, more of them are being manufactured and sold right now. But the stackers is the only way to provide more parking than they had before, so.
given,
we got to.
given what the ZB has agreed to in reducing the required parking, I think that they should be able to provide the ordinance-required breakout allocation for compact and regular-sized spaces. So I want to be clear on that. Section R, which is a waiver of section 9.0,
What that is.
First of all, Building Commissioner Bennett recommends that we not do this. My initial instinct was, why are those applicable anyway? Because those are the special permit sections, and clearly they're not here for special permits. And I think this also applies to S and T. Those are all special permit sections. So I would not be inclined to grant those if the nature of the comment is to the extent that it is granting third-party bodies final decision-making authority. I don't think we're in disagreement over that, but the rest of the request I just don't follow and wouldn't be inclined to give.
We agree. We weren't sure what to put in, and put in stuff that we weren't
Right, okay,
quite clear about, so taking that out is not a problem.
okay, thank you.
So that's R and S and then I.
That's R, S, and T. 905 is the standard by which we grant special permits.
Right, right. Okay.
You, Mr. Engler, I believe Mr. Ditto's comment was he'd like to review that, have a conversation.
We would like to sit down with him on all these, because a lot of them are fine with us and come at the process later. We're just saying that shouldn't be a separate permit, but certainly there should be review and approval of construction activities. all
Right,
those
and
things.
from our perspective, at least from the 40Bs that I have seen, these have all remained in place. They have not been waived. And they go to safety, and if I'm sitting in their seats, this is about construction. And they want to know that construction vehicles aren't going to be parked in front of their building. And they, right?
Yeah, I agree with all that.
So U, V, W, and X, we will allow a conversation to take place, but I think that the conclusion of the conversation is going to be, you're going to take them off the waiver list. Okay. And you've already removed the last one, which I am relieved at. Okay. Okay. Anybody have any questions at this time?
What's the status of the auditory screening plan?
The noise?
The noise screening plan, yes. These are my fancy words.
I can speak to that.
Mhm.
I met with the building department today, picked up the noise ordinance, tried to understand it. We're not asking any waivers from it. What happens is when you get your working drawings and your detailed specs together, you submit them to the building department. They look at what you're building, they understand from other projects whether that's gonna present a noise problem, and they'll tell you what you should be doing to, offset that noise if there is any. And they'll even measure it after you're built, so you may not even get an occupancy permit, so they're satisfied with the background noise being less than 10 decimal points or whatever that calculation is. So that all happens at the construction and occupancy stage with the building department. But we're willing to live with all that, we're not gonna waive any of that.
They're
I thought we were supposed to get a narrative of how it was going to be handled, because
Maria?
I thought that had been requested time and again.
Yes, I remember at the last hearing that Building Commissioner Bennett did recommend that the applicant provide a narrative to show how they would comply with the noise bylaw that's under our general bylaw. I do understand that Mr. Engler did speak with the building department today. I just want to ask which member of the building department staff Mr. Engler met with? There's Michael Yanovich, who's the deputy commissioner. Michael? And just wondering if Commissioner Bennett, if Commissioner Bennett wishes to add a follow-up, if he requests a narrative now, or if he feels that it suffices, since they are not asking for a waiver, to review that at the drawing stage. I think you should consult with Commissioner Bennett.
Commissioner Bennett?
Dan Bennett, Building Commissioner. I think the applicant's been pretty forward that they do not want a waiver from the provisions of the bylaw. So what we're trying to do is have some sort of a process or specifications or a narrative that would identify or describe the units that they're putting on the roof, or if there's some things in the garage, this applies to the entire building, what it is that they're proposing, the number of units. Usually in those specifications, with the make and the model, you can identify the sound and the noise levels that would be emanating from each unit. And then we could then issue a permit based on that. In addition, the board could reinforce a decision by adding a condition that they will comply, with the noise bylaw. And I think all those things combined, we could get a compliant system. That's not to say a year or two down the road. Again, I think I indicated that at the last hearing. If the units aren't maintained properly or some other issue or event happens, that we would then, enforce the provisions of the noise bylaw. And it does happen often in town, and we do enforce it.
Okay, so you've obviously noted that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yes? Okay. Anything else?
No.
No? No? Okay. Again, our next hearing is December 13th. And what, in addition to what we currently have scheduled, which is an initial review of conditions, draft conditions, we have a few outstanding issues that need to be addressed. Mr. Angler, you've told us that you'll provide the code analysis that's been asked for by Commissioner Bennett, stormwater drainage, right? Any other outstanding pieces of information?
So there's the code analysis, the stormwater calculations, the noise narrative, and I'm going to quickly look at some things I've been tracking. If you don't mind reading for a second.
We're complying with 50 ordinances. We don't have to write a narrative of all the things we're complying with. I don't understand why we need a narrative on something you said was with your bylaw. So to me, it's like, well, you said you're good with curb cut qualifications. Why do you have to write a narrative about how we're doing that? I spoke to the department. I understand what they're asking for, but I don't understand a narrative. You've already provided what's on the roof. You've provided the number of units. You've given an outline of what it is. I don't understand what more I can say in a narrative, 1 or 2 sentences, that says we'll meet with the building department and we'll comply with their ordinance. I don't quite get the outline.
Let me suggest that you have another conversation with Mr. Yanovich and see what it is that the building department would like to see.
Okay. There are a few other things I've been tracking, Mr. Geller, if you just want to hear. For trash, one thing that I did discuss with the applicant, Mr. Roth, is considering the size of the trash room and the size of the toters, he should provide how many toters can fit in the trash room. Recall that Dr. Maloney has recommended that there be a condition of an audit at 90% occupancy. And if there are more toters than what is proposed in this current plan, we would want some assurance that this wouldn't be lip service, so that we actually would be able to see if there could be another toter added, or if there would be more pickups. Right now, I think there would be 4 pickups, 2 trash, 2 recycling, so those are 4 pickup days. The applicant also needs to confirm if the waste and recycling management consultants will indeed enter the building. That might have some bearing on conditions. Mr. Ditto did review the plans for site distance. It was noted in an email to you. I just wanted to make this, put this on the record for the public's reference, that this is against section 6.04.4F. There's an analysis that is done with the building department and Division of Engineering regarding the position of a car 6 feet behind the property line. That driver should be able to see a pedestrian 5 feet on either side of the driveway. And Mr. Ditto did confer that there is adequate sight distance. I also pointed out that toters might be in the front yard temporarily. Again, we do want to know if management consultants will be entering the building to preclude the situation of any toters in the front yard, but should there be toters in the front yard, I also pointed that out to Mr. Ditto, should that affect site visibility. Let's see. I also had pointed out to the applicant that since there is no loading zone on the site, this project actually doesn't trigger that requirement. Nonetheless, there really isn't space necessarily, or there wasn't any narrative that showed that delivery trucks would be going on site and doing pickup or drop-offs there. I think it would be helpful to know what instructions the applicant would give to delivery or pickup drivers. And the other thing was that regarding the driveway design, remember there is that inflection point where the curve changes. It's an S-curve, and Mr. Stadig of Walker Consultants pointed out that there really isn't enough room at that pinch point for 2 cars to pass. Mr. Ditto did also concur in his analysis that there would be some overlap. He would recommend a wider driveway, but also did emphatically say that if that design did not change, he would be okay with the current design, considering the volume of traffic is really low for a residential project. We are awaiting comments from the police regarding any situation where there might be queuing on the street, and that's why those instructions to delivery drivers are important. And keep in mind that Center Street does not have any parking on that side of the street, which is another reason why instructions to delivery and pickup people would be important. And that's it.
Thank you.
I don't know where this comes in relevant, but in the documents we received last time where it was estimated that there would be 4 deliveries per day to the building, 1 from FedEx, 1 from the post office, 1 et cetera, I found that highly improbable. So I think that, I get 4 deliveries a day to my house, basically. So then I think that in terms of analyzing safety by the police in terms of queuing deliveries and directions to the delivery drivers, and I don't know if there's somebody in the building who's going to be accepting packages or what happens with that, or if doors are going to be buzzed, or, that all factors into the safety of what happens on the street when packages are being delivered. So I feel like I actually need a fuller idea of what is going to happen there with package delivery in our next meeting, and I'd like that to be fleshed out. And again, I challenge that whole 4 delivery truck a day assumption.
Okay, are you asking the applicant for a narrative regarding that? I was simply asking for
Actually,
what
yeah, I don't know how
instructions
else to
would be
get it.
given. If instructions are given to delivery and pickup people, then it could be that they're not parking on Center Street. It could be that they're parking across the street, or they're going in to the actual garage, or they're going into the driveway. We just want to know what instructions they would be giving so that we and the police department can review that to ensure that those would be suitable instructions, that those would be effective instructions. Does that make sense? Does that approach make sense?
Well, I guess we would ask the applicant to give that information.
Right, exactly. We're asking the applicant to provide the ZBA with instructions they would give to delivery drivers or any pickup drivers, like the waste and recycling pickup companies.
Yes, we need that by the 13th.
Correct.
Yes. And if,
I haven't heard that from the board. I have 2 comments. One, we don't have any instructions at this point. 1, 2, the loading bay is not required. 3, the trucks that park on all the other apartment buildings, have they ever been asked for this? Any of the other market rate apartments have been asked for these kind of instructions? I want to
think on 420 Harvard, if I may point out, there is a loading zone, but I think that we've also asked that that also be reinforced by giving giving drivers instructions not to park on Fuller Street.
And usually there are loading docks like at 45 Marion, right?
We see the 3 and 50 trucks parked up and down Center Street unloading stuff. It's just common practice. All I'm saying is, what else has been asked for by any other departments, not 420, that's another 40B. I want to know what's been asked for by market rate developments that have been built under special permits. In terms of instructions to drivers, when no parking or loading bays are required, where do they park on the street? What do the instructions say? I think that's overboard.
Well, I think we would look at buildings that are similarly oversized for the lot, basically, if we were looking for.
Buildings that don't have space to pull in. They
Well-
don't have to be oversized, they just don't have a loading bay.
But this is also, depends on when they are built. I mean, the buildings further down on Center Street were built in the 60s, and there were, different zoning laws. Well, we can try to get that information the last 10, 15 years, but I don't think that it is an unreasonable request at all that we're making. I think that it is a safety consideration. And I think it's especially important in this instance because one of the things we've been talking about has been the scarcity of room for parking, for loading, et cetera. And I have seen the materials that were submitted, the pictures of other loading trucks, but the fact that somebody else violates the law does not mean that your client is allowed to.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, do you think,
I think Brown's going to park where Brown wants to park.
Yeah, that's right. We've been through this at our condominium a lot.
Right, and you're right,
they-
your building's right on the street.
Right on Park Street.
Right. So you-
And the drivers change, they don't get the instructions. I think we can put something in as a requirement, but quite frankly, it's not enforceable.
That's the problem.
so there was a discussion about what happened in terms of, like, trying to enforce, like, no parking in front of restaurants, or there are attempts made to ensure, for example, that the trucks don't park right in front of the driveway.
Yeah, there are,
So-
right, there are attempts to create a no parking zone.
Right, so we want to try to not create an inherently extremely dangerous situation, right?
Well, it's already a no parking zone, so legally, it is a no parking zone. You can't park on that side of the street.
Mhm.
The issue is, Chris's response and my response is sort of a practical reality of all these delivery companies. I suspect, for instance, 19 Winchester, is there parking on your side of the building on Winchester Street? Yeah. There is, cars are allowed to park on that side? Okay. I suspect on many, many buildings where there's no parking on that side of the street, the delivery people, they just go anywhere they want. How many people have seen a delivery truck with a ticket around its side view mirror? So I'm not opposed to discussing something as a condition. I'm at a loss, how do you enforce it, frankly? I don't have the answer to that one. You can say you must park across the street where there's legal parking, but how are you going to enforce it? So that's the issue. So I'm not disagreeing with you, I just haven't really thought it through because I think it's more of a conditions discussion.
Well, going back, I think we should have, 180 days, said build a loading dock, but next time around, we got,
Be pretty unusual for a building like this to require it.
okay, we got 5 more coming up.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Okay, so again, I want to thank everyone, and not tonight. We may have time on the 13th conditions for input about conditions.
Does this mean that we may never be able to speak?
No. as I said, next hearing is the 13th. And on the 13th, we're going to start our discussion about conditions. Sure. So conditions are those requirements that we put on the project as a precondition to their getting their permit, okay? So it would include, for instance, compliance with, and we'll list them out, construction requirements, okay? Cleaning requirements for vehicles, things of that nature. So, for instance, maybe this is a bad thing to refer to, but in the case of Hancock Village, the first case, we had 70 conditions on that project. You have to do this, you have to do this. So that's what conditions are. And in fact, we had a number of comments. I see Rich in the back, and he had some comments. And Derek Chang also sent in some comments already starting to suggest conditions. And that will be part of our discussion. And I'll be candid with you, some of them, you know, we will consider and will be part of our discussions, and others we may think, well, it goes to the more core issues of, you know, 6-story building, massive building, rather than being conditions to address what we've agreed upon. So those are conditions, and we welcome your comments. Written fashion, we're going to set aside some time to take some testimony, but again, it will be about conditions. It's not about the project as a whole, it's about conditions for an approved project. So if you want to offer testimony along those lines, we welcome it, but you should focus on that. The intent is that, do you want to speak to this?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so I will do my best to get a draft ready by 12:05, but town council does need to review it.
Right.
So our goal is to have it available to the public and the applicant a few days in advance of 12/13. It won't be a full week because we do have to have our 40B consultant. I've already started on conditions and I'm already tracking them. That won't be the only hearing in which you will be discussing conditions or taking public testimony.
Right.
That is just the first hearing.
And just so people understand, what happens is that in generating conditions, what we do, Maria does to assist us, is that we go to comments received from peer review, town departments and boards, the public, both in written fashion and verbally, and you've actually given tells in your comments. And those get filtered into things, the conditions. And again, I don't want to suggest every single thing that you've suggested is going to be there, but the core things based on comments that have been received from the board members will reappear in some fashion typically as conditions. And what will take place is we will go through those conditions. If there are 70, you will see us sitting here, reading the conditions, going through them, and we are going to discuss those conditions, just as you saw us with the waivers, and we will have different opinions about them. And when they are posted, and I will apologize to you in advance, because I will tell you that they are long, they are complicated, and you will not have a time to fully digest them. It's simply, neither will we. It's simply the way this works. But they will be posted, and you will be able to review them and look at them and offer your comments. You can submit them in written fashion, and we will look at them, yes.
I just,
Absolutely.
Please read that.
We read everything you submit. Believe it or not, we read everything you submit.
I just found this last night on YouTube, fascinating and scary. I won't be here next week, so if I have to discuss it,
Is it the 13th?
it'll be
2 weeks, 2 weeks.
Right, I won't be here the
Okay, okay. You mean the next hearing?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Is there any opportunity for our attorney to review the waiver comments and for the conditions?
When you say the waiver comments, the discussion that took place tonight?
Well, yeah, there's going to be a draft, I assume,
The,
So the waivers were actually distributed to the community through Derek Chang. There was a point, and you also got them too. That was the draft, and then there was a follow-up from the applicant where he
Right.
had made additional changes. So we've posted waivers online. So what you see projected on the screen is actually posted online. Was that your question?
Yeah, we know that.
you want the flavor of the hearing and the discussions that took place, is that what you want?
Well, is there going to be a draft prior to a final waiver list, or whatever you call these things, that you guys are putting together that we could have reviewed, that the public could have reviewed?
Perhaps it's the draft decision, the draft
Are
of
you-
conditions that you're talking about, which would include, which are on the screen. Right,
A
so you-
revised, they want to see, they're asking about a revised draft.
Okay.
Okay.
So what will happen is that when you get the draft conditions, the waivers that the ZBA decided to grant will be included there, and the ones that you did not want to grant will be excluded.
Right.
That's how it is.
And there are some that are subject to discussions, so I'm not sure it's a bad idea to,
What we'll
Sure.
do is we'll just repeat what this is with the
Right.
status of the discussion, because there are some
Perfect.
some waivers that you're circling back
does
to.
that help?
We'll add a column and put it online within the next day or two. And I just want to reiterate that the transcript for this discussion, I know nobody's here and stuff happens, but
Right.
there is a way to get it from the video.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've already discussed that with the court stenographer. It is their error. It is not the town's error, and they've admitted that. And beg your pardon?
I say that's understood.
So what will happen is that there is a video that will be archived through Brookline Interactive Group, and I will get my hands on that and give it to the court stenographer to see if they can transcribe from
good,
that.
okay. So we'll do the best we can. Okay, yeah. And the second part, I don't want to forget the second part of your question, which was the question about conditions, which is yes. So those will be, so what we will have is, once those have been reviewed by town council, and once those have been reviewed by the peer review consultant, those will be posted, and they'll obviously be available to your council.
And then we have an opportunity to comment.
Mm.
At the public hearing.
Right.
At a public hearing.
At the public hearing, not when I see you on the street. Okay. I want to thank everyone for your patience, and we will see you again December 13th, 7 p.m.